So, welcome back to this course on certificate data science and analytics. Just a small recap of what we had looked at last time. We discussed the issue of summarization and pivot tables, and I think we explained what pivot tables are. We looked at how we can clean our data in preparation for tables. We looked at the prerequisites of pivot tables, that is clean data, of course, and columns must have the same type of data in order for them to work effectively. We saw how to create pivot tables in terms of what goes into rows, what goes into columns, and what goes into the value, which is the function you want to perform. And the functions are different. They're aggregate functions generally. There is count, there is sum, there's average, standard deviation, minimum, maximum, and so forth and so forth. We also saw how we can group our pivot tables, maybe in terms of dates. And I think we also saw how to group our pivot tables in terms of things like maybe values, something like less than 3,000, between 3,000 and 4,000, 4,000, 5,000, above 5,000, and something of the sort. Then I think last we look at how we can filter the top n items within our pivot table. I think that's what we discussed last, and I left you with a very huge task that you should be able to look at and try out and see what you can come up with, which should have been a good practice for us in terms of how this can be achieved. Is that the case? Is that what we discussed?
Yes,
Awesome. And I gave you a task of I think about 20 or so questions to try out. I think I tried about four or something of that kind. I don't know if there was any challenge with some of those tasks so that I might try to explain a bit before we move on to something else. Was there any challenge with the tasks or they were straightforward? So,
No challenge so far.
no challenge so far. That's excellent. So that's good. Now, based on that, I want us to move into something else, which is basically converting these data into uh, charts and graphs and cards. Remember, we can always summarize data in terms of tables, which we have done effectively well using data tables. So we want to look at the other techniques that are there that will help us to be able to uh, um, make sense out of the patterns much, much faster. And these ones are usually done with pictures because pictures are easier to see and understand in terms of how they represent data. So if I just give you a list of raw data like this, like the one showing on my screen right now, you probably see that this doesn't work so well. Well, it's data, but it doesn't make sense. But if I was to translate it to something else, something like showing us here sales by items, then this makes sense. If I wanted to say, I want to know how much each branch has sold, then that makes sense. Maybe if you want to know how much each branch has sold per product, something like that, I would simply do something like that. So I'll definitely know how much each branch has sold per product. And you can see now this starts to make a lot of sense very, very fast. So I can't be able to tell, in as much as I'm dealing with totals as far as this point is concerned, this is how you're able to sell per product. And probably I might want to compare all these things maybe in form of a pictorial to see which products are fast moving within which branches and so forth and so forth. So I can make a decision on the rest. So that's excellent. So we moved from raw data, which is this, into some analyzed data, which are things like these pivot tables are giving us. And well, whereas it's okay and it's giving us some direction, it might not be very straightforward what this data is talking about. Yes, we have the numbers, we have the comparison and all that, but sometimes pictures speak 1,000 words, and that's why we want to look at how to work with graphs, charts, and basically what we call cards in order to be able to see how we can make sense out of this data or how we can draw patterns from this data very, very fast. So in short, what we're going to do is we will take our pivot tables and we will convert them into charts. Now, We have different types of charts that you can be able to use with your data. We have bar charts, we have line charts, we have trend lines, we have pie charts and donut charts, we have scatter diagrams, and so many of them. So it will depend on exactly what you would want to do with your data. So let me give you a classic example of, for example, we have these cells over here, where we're saying we want to compare the sales of products. We want to say to compare sales of different products. Now, if I was to give you this, what would make you read this data easily? How would you read this data easily? Using what type of chart? Is it going to be a bar chart? Is it going to be a line chart? Is it going to be a scatter diagram, or maybe a pie chart, or even an area chart, or what graph would work best with this kind of data? Any idea? For me, it would be either a budget.
A budget.
A budget would work best, but again, budgets are not usually very, very neat. So I would probably prefer an inverted column chart. And I'll explain why I'm picking that. Actually, I'll show it to you with the bar chart. Then I'll show it with an inverted chart. Then you can be able to see the difference between the two of them and why one works better than the other one. Now, the good thing with Excel is that once you have analyzed this data like this, you can just place your cursor anywhere inside the pivot table. Then you can come to Insert over here. Then you pick your chart on this chart tab over here. You can really pick any type of chart. But in my case, I want to pick a bar chart, as you've mentioned, like that. So you can see I have my bar chart over there, which I can hide these columns. And I can also add this legend because I only have one field. Mm, where is hide legend? So I can have it like that. Well, you can see, yeah, that's a budget. It might look nice. It may not look nice depending on how big the name of what you're dealing with is and so forth and so forth. So yes, that would be able to work, and you can see that. But again, if I look at this diagram like this, sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense because if I wanted to see which one is the highest, well, probably I'll have to look for the longest chart, which is Giant Wonder, then probably followed by the second longest, which is KDF Packet, and I can go on and on. Probably the third one is Donuts Packet. It's almost close to that. So I'll have to like cross my eyes across the entire chart to be able to try and see exactly what's going on. But now let me show you how a different chart would be able to make this in communication much more effective. So I'll use the same pivot table. Then I'll come to insert and I'll come to charts, of course. Then here I'll pick an inverted bar like this. So this is an inverted bar, right? So I'll probably place it here. I will hide the totals, of course. Oh, well, sorry. I'll probably hide all the totals, hide all field totals like that. Then I'll probably remove that. And as you can see, now this is okay, but not well thought of. So what I could do is I can come to this table and I can sort this data, this one over here, from smallest to largest, like that. And now you can see, well, again, these ones are not showing so well. So you might want to format them in thousands because all of them are definitely in thousands, so that these uh, uh, these numbers down here show something that is pretty readable. So again, you don't have to struggle with memorizing how to work with thousands. You can just say Excel convert to thousands, thousands to K, something like that. So it will Somebody saying something?
No,
Go ahead.
no, I don't have a question.
All right. So if you wanted to convert 2000, I said you don't have to remember, you don't have to memorize the formula like that. So I could simply put, I want to do decimal places, so I'll put something like this. So I'll pick this, I will copy it, then I'll highlight all the text here, then I'll come to format cells here, then I'll say custom, then I'll paste that function here. And because I want two decimal places, I'll put 0.00. That should give me two decimal places, and I click on OK. Okay, so probably I think why can't it use the one I've formatted? I think that should be okay. That should be okay. That should be okay. That should be okay. Let me just check again. That formula should have been that format should have been okay. Because actually that, well, I can use this. When that don't have millions. Custom, put the custom value over there, then say okay. So you can see it does it in case. Of course, as I said, if I wanted it in two decimal places or one decimal place, you can format the cells and you can add yeah, something like that. So you can have it in decimal places like that. So you can have two decimal places. So you can see that way, if I compared these two charts like this one is much more easy to read because now I have the highest followed by all the low way to the smallest. And of course, I also have the comparison on this other axis like this. So it's much easier to read. Even if the name was longer, you can compare to this. So sometimes when you're working with data and you want to do pictorials, it's better when you do something like this, like the one that I've just listed over here. Now, again, as you can see, these lines are a bit thin, so I can come and format them and probably maybe increase the data series. So probably maybe I might want to increase the gap or rather reduce the gap between them. If I reduce the gap, they become thicker, as you can see. The more I reduce the gap, the thicker they become. So you can even reduce the gap to 0. Well, of course, 0 won't make sense because they'll be too close together. But you can see that now starts to make a lot of sense. Well, as I said, you can decide to move it all the way to 0 if you wanted to, which means that they probably are going to have quite a bit of minimal space between them. So something of the sort. So you can format that like that. So you can see now this starts to make a lot of sense if you compare it with what we have on the list. Well, they represent the same type of information, but again, if I look at this data from this angle, then this makes much more sense compared to what I have on this list over here. Now, if I wanted just the totals, this would make a lot of sense. But if I wanted to see how the distribution is. Of course, compared to one another, I'll be able to say that Giant Wonder is the largest. And of course, KDF and Donuts are close together. Normal, Wonder, and Milky are almost close. Of course, even with Sandwich. Then, of course, White Buns is trailing them. But of course, Kamini White is the one that is the least. But of course, the sales are still within the margin of between 50 and 100K, which is about 86.2K. So this is how we come up with pictorials. Again, it will depend on the kind of pictorial that you want to generate. What's important is the kind of message this pictorial is actually sending out. So that's one example of how a pictorial would work. Maybe the next thing we could do is how would you plot this kind of chart? For this kind of a diagram, if you wanted to show how products are moving per branch, but also want to display all the products, which chart would make the most sense out of them all? Where somebody just reads it and they're able to tell, okay, this is how it's going. How would you go about it? Any idea? Again, for convenience's sake, we convert these ones into thousands. So number format, custom. I don't know if our copy is still in memory, should be. Then maybe you can put one decimal place for 1,000 and one decimal place for million, something like that. That makes it's much easier to read it in thousands like that. Okay. So which chart would make much more sense when you're doing this kind of comparison? Because again, we want to determine what pattern is there on the data. What pattern is there is what we are actually looking for. Now, if you'd have asked me for this, I would still use a bar chart. Then, of course, the bar chart would have multiple legends, and of course, as such, then that would allow us to be able to see what each branch has sold in terms of category. So again, I'll place my cursor inside the um, the pivot table. Then I'll come to insert, and I'll pick this time. I want histogram per se, but a budget to do something like that. Then, of course, I would move I would remove this field and this one also. Then I would probably move this legend to the bottom, format legend, and probably move it to the bottom like that. And then, of course, now I can make the chart bigger depending on how I have sold. So you can see that way now. I can actually hide this filter. I don't need to filter that data by that category. So you can see based on this, I now have different colors. This should be somewhere there. You can make it as big as possible depending on how you want to present it. But I can be able to see in terms of donors, CBD, I mean, Westlands had the largest share, of course, followed by the next one, which is Thika, followed by the CBD, of course, followed by South B branch, and finally the Eastlands branch. So I can be able to see for each particular product how each of the categories work, and of course, depending on the different products, I can even see the one with the highest number of sales as we are moving along. So again, that would still be able to work fine with this kind of arrangement. Again, you might also just want to change this data a bit. So I can come to pivot table and probably, where is it? Where is the pivot table? It's not showing. Oh, it's here. So I can just, if depending on what I want to change, I could simply change the product with the branch, something like that. So you can see now I have a branch and then I have the products down here. So how much each branch is. So and as you can see how easy it is to be able to fix that kind of a change. If I wanted to implement such kind of a change, it is basically just 2 clicks. I simply swap rows and columns, and I'm able to change how my actual graph is represented. Very powerful, very easy, almost zero effort on your end in terms of coming up with this kind of analysis. Excel will do it very, very thoroughly for you. Then we also have this kind of, for this kind of chart, how do we compare them? For this kind of chart, how do you compare them? What would be the best chart for this? Well, I wanted to use different types of charts. Well, probably maybe, yeah, maybe this one, we can group this one. Maybe we can group this one in terms of, oh, this one had an issue with dates. I remember we had an issue with dates and where's the access data. This date was a bit of a problem, but I think we fixed it. I think here is what we didn't refresh. Then we can try to group. Yeah, so we just didn't refresh it, so we can group. And we say we want to start on this date and end on this date, and we want to filter it by month. So we want sales by month. So something like January all the way to December, something of the sort. So if you were to plot this nicely, then probably something like a trend line would work best for us. So again, I'll place my cursor inside here. Then I'll come to insert and I'll insert a graph. But in this case, I'll insert a trend line, which is here. Trend line is actually here. So I like this kind of a trend line. It depends on what you like, but I like this one with dots, lines with markers. Well, I only have one how do you call it? I only have one legend, so I don't need to compare multiple things. So I can remove that, and I can also remove this and this. Oh, sorry, I needed to remove this filter, that filter. Then, of course, usually you leave out the headings because you might want to also see what the headings are telling you. And of course, for trendline, because they're usually covering a whole period like that, so you usually would make them a little bit longer. Just hold on a second. Okay, so sorry about that. So as I was saying, what's important here is knowing what graph to use. So again, for trend lines, like if we want to show something like between January and December, a trend line will work best because the time series below is chronological. It has to follow January all the way to December, as opposed to these other ones like I would try to compare maybe by branch. I might want to compare by product or maybe even this first one where I want to compare by the largest to the smallest or something of the sort. Now, one thing I didn't factor in or I didn't create was maybe let's just group by the type of customer. Now, usually when I'm working with the same pivot table, instead of going back and forth and placing the cursor inside the pivot table, then coming to insert, then coming to pivot table, what I usually do is I just pick one with pivot table like this. Then I hold Control and I drag it to the left. It will create a copy of it over here, something like that, and you can see the name was copied. I can remove this infographic. The pivot table is exactly the same, so the only thing I need to do is to change how the calculations are done. So in this particular case, I want total amount, but in this case, I want to group these things by category, like that. So no, not category, but by type of customer type, I think, sales type. No, okay, even that would work, but I wanted actually by customer type. Yeah, so I want to do something like this. So for something like this, the best kind of graph to use would probably be a pivot table because the values are smaller. There are just three things to compare. So what I'll do is I'll take this and I'll come to insert. Then I'll pick now a pivot chart. Now I like using a donut instead of a regular chart. I like using a donut, but you can still use a 3D pie or a regular pie. Or so it will all depend on really what's good for you. I like a donut instead because they're they look more beautiful if you ask me. Again, I'll remove that field. I'll remove that filter. I don't need to have that. Then I'll format the legend and place it at the bottom. It looks like nicer to me like that. I might want to increase the center of the circle here. So I can come here and uh, there's usually what you call the gap. The gap is where is the gap? The gap is the gap is there's usually a way that you create the gap. Oh, there. So the inside. I can change the. Actually, it's this one. There's a way that I usually increase the whole size, or is it the entire chart? Whole size. Are you seeing something like whole size? I'm not seeing whole size here. Um, whole size, whole size, whole size. I'm not seeing whole size here. I should be able to see a whole size. Whole size. Okay, I'm not seeing the whole. Okay, I'm not seeing the whole size, but anyway, you can always come and increase the size of the hole over here. It's something that I was looking for. It's not that, but it's not that, but anyway, you would probably be able to use this chart in that particular manner. Again, as I said, you would have as many you can have as many elements as possible because again you can place components, you can do totals. Like a very classic example, if I wanted to just get a grand total sales, I could come to insert over here, then I could insert a shape, something like that, and I draw it inside here. Then I could simply come and edit the text to this and probably assign it a value if I wanted to give it this total over here, something of that sort. So it will depend on really how you want to go about it. My focus is not really on that. I wanted to focus mostly on how you could work with charts and how you could group them together to form what we call a dashboard. Because eventually, what usually happens with uh, trying to come up with patterns is you want to look for relationship between the data. You want to look at the relationship between the different sets of data that you have. And that's the essence of us converting these things from regular tables into pictorials. Then from the pictorials, we want to combine them together so that we can now come up with a way of saying we think this data works fine. Probably maybe I can do one for this sheet over here. This sheet over here, I can give these ranges. Probably maybe I can draw it in form. Yeah, I can do it in terms of this one would work best in terms of a bar chart, a normal bar chart, sorry. Yeah, it will work best in form of a bar chart. A 3D one, no, but maybe that should be okay. Normal bar chart would be fine. I could also hide this. I could hide this. And I don't need this legend because it's only one. So probably maybe I might want to show these numbers in thousands. And sorry, might want to show these numbers in thousands. Well, maybe this in thousands. Sorry. I think we had it somewhere here. Here. I doubt that would work. I doubt that would work because this is already arranged, so that would not probably work. But again, this is fine with us. I can just make it a little bit wider so that the numbers are not overlapping each other like that. Or I might change the numbers directly from the list. But again, you get the idea. So when I have this, the only other thing that's left for me to do is probably to change the titles and maybe change these colors if I felt like those colors were not okay with me, like for the fill. If I wanted a different color like that, I'll probably add that for this. I'll probably maybe gap, decrement the gap between them, and also decrement the overlap so that they are close together, something of the sort. So it will depend on really how I want to achieve. Most importantly, I could now start putting the totals and say this one is uh, sales by uh, range. This is a sale by range, so between less than 250 all the way to between 3,000 and 3,250. Again, before you group this data, you can actually, before you group this data, you can actually convert it and group. You can actually convert it into tens and thousands, but again, you can see, well, I don't think it's going to make such a big difference. So probably maybe I can try to format it uh, to see how it looks like. Again, it's good to experiment. No decimal places. Well, that won't work. Probably it's because that is what we're using as our column and you can't group our columns. So I'll probably just return it to how it were and we're good to go. So that's by range. This is by product. Of course, I've removed the heading. You can add it back. This is, I also removed the heading here. You can add it back if you need to. This is sales by customer type. Sales by customer type. So once I have that, now we have different graphs, but we want to see how we can create them to form a relationship. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new worksheet over here, and going to call this one dashboard. Dashboard. Just make it slightly large. call it dashboard like that. Then what you're going to do is just going to pick our pictorials, copy them, and place them inside our dashboard. Anywhere, you can put them together, then you can come and format them when you're done. So I'll copy this, I'll come here on the dashboard, and I'll paste it like that. So not a problem, just put them together, then you can see how they start looking. So I have this one over here, I can copy it, Control C, or you can right click, then you say copy, whichever is easier for you. Come to my dashboard, this is a bit bigger, so I can place it up here. Again, I don't want it to be too big, so I might want to shrink it a bit like that, then move it up here, something like that. So we have that. Then, of course, you can move them down. Hold Control, hold the other one, then just move them together, something of the sort. It gets a little bit used to. So again, you need to practice on that. I'll pick this one, I'll copy it, I'll bring it to the dashboard here and paste it. Well, right click and paste. I don't know why Control V is not working. Bring this one here, like that, and you can move it up a bit, like that. So you can see it's starting to take a little bit of shape. Again, you can move this one a little bit down, so they are almost along the same line or plane. I would come to this, I would take this trend line, I would copy it. Of course, trend line, I would usually like to make it the first element up here, then bring it up here, maybe shrink it a bit, shrink it up a bit, then move it to the left and make it the same size as this other one. Probably move it a little bit lower. That's almost, they're almost together like that. So, well, maybe the right edge, not quite, but there should go. Not yet. And by there, if it is too small, just make it big enough so that now you can be able to make them align perfectly like that. You don't need to struggle with the size of a small screen. Just make it a little bit bigger, then push it down again. You'll see they line up nicely. So usually they would line up depending on the view that you're actually on. Of course, there is one more, which is this. So I'll take this, I'll copy it, and I'll paste it here. So I'll paste that here. And probably maybe what I'll do is I'll bring it closer here, like that. And then I'll probably squish it so that it is aligned with that, like that. And then probably make it taller, just a little bit to match the height of the others, like that. So whatever we have created here is what is referred to as actually a dashboard. Even though I've only used graphs on this dashboard, but you can see I have a couple of things explaining several things as far as my data is concerned. I can see my sales trend between January and December, so I can convert this one to sales trend. So you can give them name, Jan, and maybe you could say this is 2026. Depending on whichever data you've collected. This is sales by product. This is sales by, this is sales by branch for different products. This is the how each product performed. This is how each the value of the number of count for sales between a certain values. And of course, this is how we are selling by customer type. So we have all this data in one place, and this is what you're referring to as a dashboard. Now, this is important because we have condensed all the information in one place. The only problem with this arrangement is that now somebody might ask you to filter out some data back and forth. Somebody might ask you, I want you to filter out this data in this particular format so that I'm able to see how the products were moving left, right, and center. And I'll give you an example. Say I want to know in terms of the type of sale. I want to filter this data based on the type of cell that is there, all of it as it is. Now, you might know that that is going to be a very difficult task if I was to filter that data by the type of cell. Actually, for the type of cell, what we have here is it's either a walk-in cell or a regular. No, that's the type of customer. The type of cell is either regular or bulk. Or I wanted to know which ones were paid via M-Pesa or something of that sort, So you can really filter out this data with so many fields, so to speak. But I'll show us how to filter out with two. So for you to filter out this data, in Excel, we use something called slicers. So slicers will help us to filter out this data in such a way that now, once you've come up with this dashboard, we're able to filter it out based on particular sets of data. Then whatever remains inside this particular dashboard is only the data matching that criteria, and you can see it across the entire spectrum of the data that we are currently dealing with. Let me give you a classic example. We want to filter this data based on the cell type, bulk or regular. What I would do is I would come into one of my pivot tables, then I will come into the insert menu over here. Then I'll pick something called a slicer, which is here, slicer. Now I'll be given all the fields that I have within my table, depending on how I selected the table. Of course, the pivot table comes from a table, so naturally I would have the cell type here. So I'll pick the cell type and I'll say, okay. So you can see I'll be given cell type is two things. So what I'll do is I'll cut this slicer, I'll come to my dashboard and I'll place it somewhere here, paste it. Now, this is okay. There's no problem with this. And it will work well when it comes to slicing this data. So for example, when I click on bulk alone, you have seen that only this chart here has changed, the one where the focus is. So if I select regular, only this chart has changed. But you want to make sure that whenever we select these charts, whenever we select these filters, it applies to all the pictorials we have within our dashboard. So what do? What you do is you right click this slicer and you say report connections over here. Then you'll be asked how many pivot tables do you have in your current file. You'll pick all of them like that. Then you say okay. Now I want you to observe what will happen if I say bulk only. You can see everything else has changed. You can see this was at 5,000, now it's at 700. If I pick bulk alone, this is now at 800, and everything else has changed in terms of ranges. So everything inside my table has actually changed in terms of ranges. What I could do is I could show legend here. I could show, I can add data labels here like that, so that when I click on regular, you can see these numbers have changed. And you can see also these numbers have dropped significantly and all that. So I can filter by bulk or regular, or I can filter by all of them. If I just click, it will highlight all of them. If I click, it unticks. So you can select multiple. That's one way of filtering the data. And actually, it's the most effective way that you can use to filter out this data without necessarily paining yourself in terms of how will I be able to, look for patterns if I wanted to only look for values matching X or value matching Y and so forth and so forth. So I'll go ahead and add another slicer. Again, come to your pivot table. You can go to any, by the way. It doesn't have to be the first one. You can go to any because they're picking data from the same place. Come to insert, come to slicer. Now pick the next thing. I want to do it by, is it payment mode? I want payment method, something like that. So these are the payment methods that I have. So again, I'll cut this and I'll take it to my dashboard. I'll place it down here. So what will happen is, again, I'll connect this to all my pivot tables. I'll expand this and tick all of them. I hope I connected this to all of them. Yeah, connect to all of them. So once you connect to all of them, I want you to observe what would happen. If I say I want only M-Pesa payments, you can see all the data has changed and it's pointing to me all these reports based on what has been sold by M-Pesa only. If I say cash only, everything changes based on cash only. If I say card only, everything changes based on card only. And if I say card only for regular payments, you can see also it filters out based on those two. So I can add as many filters as possible in the form of slices, so that now um, my my dashboard is able to respond to any changes in terms of what data I want to look for or what pattern I'm looking for as far as the content of my analysis is concerned. That's a lot. I hope yote imeingia. Is this fine? Or is a question? My point was we wanted to convert pivot tables into pictorials. In this case, I was only using graphs. You can use cards, you can use infographics, depends on really what you're trying to create anyway. But of course, for this kind of analysis that you're doing, of course, for presentation purposes, charts would work best. So once you convert those pivot tables into charts, then we now do multiple charts depending on what you want to communicate, what is effective, how to use the various charts and that kind of a thing. Then from there, we combine the charts into one diagram called a dashboard. Then from there, we figure out how to now filter out the data so that we can be able to look for different patterns within the data that we might want to look for to answer a few questions here and there, or maybe to even convince whoever tasked us with the responsibility of analyzing the data on what can be done best, including showing them or demonstrating to them what is very, very effective. Okay? Any question? Now, these things are very practical, as I had mentioned. So what I would recommend you do is you take the data and you try the questions that you answer, you try to come up with ways that you can, the kind of graphs that you can plot for that kind of data, then how you want to filter out that data, probably answering very specific questions. Somebody might ask, what is the problem with card payments? So, I mean, there's no problem because if you compare to the M-Pesa, the range is almost the same. But of course, if the range is much, much smaller compared to M-Pesa, then I can come and say, okay, I think I need to up my game on card payments. Maybe people want to buy, but I don't have uh, uh, the option for them paying via card. That's why card sales are very, very minimal. So you see, that is now how you convince somebody on how they can be able to make a decision. Are we together? Now, here I'm only focusing on how to do things. We're going to take an actual project and see how we can do all the steps that we have done, including coming up with a dashboard like this that you can filter and you can compile and you can send to somebody and even connect it to your database so that whenever that data changes, it just adjusts itself as you are moving along with the data. You don't need to recreate it every other time. You can even just flash it on the screen and it keeps on updating itself maybe every 30 minutes or every 1 hour or every 5 minutes, depending on the frequency that you want. But you don't need to do anything on the data. It will constantly be showing you what is happening. Or like, for example, those people invest in stocks or markets, they want to see how the market is responding to certain things. And they want to know where it is highest so that they can sell and when it is lowest so that they can be able to buy or something of the sort. So there's quite a number of use cases that you can have with this kind of an arrangement. What's important is for us to just understand exactly how that works out. Okay? Any question? Now I'll give you opportunity to ask for questions, but also what's important is us understanding exactly how this works out. This is very, very important. Once you understand how this comes out, if I gave you the chart as it were like right now, you'd be wondering what kind of magic I have done on this. So what's important is understanding what you need to do to be able to achieve the kind of effect that I have had on this data moving forward. Again, I think this is where I'm going to close Excel. Then we're going to start how to now use Python in doing the same kinds of things. Okay, are we together? Is there any
Yes.
question? Is there any question you can ask? Kama kuna swali mtu aulize.
I have a suggestion.
Mhm.
Will you send the class presentation to the group for those who have not attended for more practice?
Okay, I can do that. I'll upload it on YouTube, then I can be able to generate the presentation from there. Not a problem. I can do that.
Okay.
Mm. Any other concern? Now it looks very easy when I do it, but again, as I've said, you have to practice so that you get to master it. Because when it comes to data science and analytics, this is exactly what you probably will be doing from morning to evening, working with different kinds of data, with different kind of presentations, with different kinds of filtration, and maybe how to group this data and how to split it and all that kind of stuff. That is going to be your everyday cup of tea. Okay. So practice makes perfect. I'm only doing this because I'm used to working with a lot of data to clean it up, especially for data migration into systems. So probably maybe that's why I'm comfortable with working with a lot of data. Actually, I work with a lot of data, lots of it, tons of it, so to speak. So it's usually good once when you get your hands dirty, you can also go to the good thing nowadays you don't need to go to Kaggle to get data. But well, if you still want, you can go to Kaggle, kaggle.com. Then you get a lot of sample data over there. There is a lot of data that you can get here in terms of um, just data sets that you are looking for. You'll get quite a lot of data, whether it is trading data sets, it's benchmarks, it is list of universities, sales data, salaries, all that kind of stuff. So it's a good place to get. Again, with the good thing with AI nowadays is that I can go to ChatGPT and tell it to generate for me the data. So really not a challenge when it comes to getting to extracting data. But again, you just need to understand that once I get this data, what do I use it for exactly? That's what is very, very key for us to be able to understand. Okay. Again, I think I've given you enough data. This is it's only 3,000. Not might not be much, but I think the variety is what I didn't incorporate so much. I need to come up with multiple categories. So probably maybe I can work on something that has multiple categories. Then from there, you can try to get more variation in terms of what kind of analysis you want to make for certain elements within the trends that you're looking for. Okay. So if there's no further question, I think I'll take a break at that. I'll share the um, video on YouTube as usual. I'll also prepare the presentation for you. Probably maybe you give me time until tomorrow morning, or probably maybe a few minutes after it, because I have another class starting in at 7:15 or 7:30 thereabouts. So I may not be able to do the presentation to make the presentation by that time. But definitely after the class, I should try to make sure that I am able to make it available for you. But for the video, I'll make it available because anybody can be able to follow up what actually transpired within the class. Is that okay? Again, I'll
Yes.
send you some tasks to practice with. I'll try to generate some uh, graphs that you can play with based on the data that we have, so you can try to get your hands dirty and see how far you can be able to go with this data. Again, I'm not focusing, this focus was not on Excel as a tool, but basically how we can use Excel for purposes of performing our analytics and seeing how patterns work with the data that we currently have. Otherwise, this is not really pure Excel. Of course, you could use any spreadsheet that you you have, like maybe Google Sheets or maybe Library Sheets or whichever special application you have. Most of the features that I've demonstrated here will be in one way or another available in those tools, only that they might be called different names or they can be found in different locations. But otherwise, everything else should be the same. Okay. So again, it's just a tool. I don't think we'll have time to look at Tableau, but since you've looked at Excel, I think Tableau should be closer to Excel. So probably you can find your way around it. What I want us to focus on from tomorrow is the Python for programming language and the libraries that it offers and how we can use those libraries to be able to analyze data, plot the graphs like the ones I've done here, and do so many other things with it. Okay. Fine. If there's no question, I think we take a break at that. We resume again tomorrow at 5:30. Somebody has a question or a comment?
No.
All right. So if there's none, then I think let's take a break. We meet tomorrow at 5:30. Then we see what happens with that. Again, tomorrow I want us to start with Python unless there will be an issue that needs to be addressed. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Have a wonderful evening. Until tomorrow.